Well, today we are in part 2 of our series called, and the big idea of this series, if you missed last week, is that one of the things we believe is that God has a calling on your life. And God has a plan and a purpose for your life, but the challenge is, number one, it's hard to discern and understand what that is at times, and two, it can be an extraordinary risk to actually step out in faith and trust God in that capacity. What we said last week is that God's calling in your life is not something that originates inside of you. You are not the author of your calling in life. God is the author of the calling in your life, and it is not a calling we hear with our ears as much as we hear it with our heart, with our soul, with our mind. It is not something we hear just out of the blue as much as we hear it when we're reading the Bible, when we gather as the church. Jesus said when the church gathers, he shows up, which is why one of the reasons I love Sundays is not because I get a microphone, which is a nice perk, but it is because God shows up when the church gathers, and I believe that he wants to impact your life and he wants to impact your eternal destination. So to understand what it means in your life today, that God has a calling for you, what we're doing is we're looking at the life of one of the most influential men in all of human history, a man by the name of Abraham. He is so influential that today in our world, about 60% of the world's population claims some sort of connection to Abraham. You cannot understand human civilization today if you do not understand the life of Abraham. And he was the Chuck Norris of his generation. He lived a big life, a bold life. Life did not happen to Abraham. Abraham happened to life. But the reason why he happened to life was not because of personal ambition or drive, but he had a different kind of ambition. It was an ambition that was focused on following God's calling in his life. So every week in this series, we are looking at how God's call came to Abraham in his life again and again and again, and how Abraham responded to God's calling in life. And that is what made him a significant person. Today, we're going to talk about what is perhaps the biggest obstacle that keeps us from hearing and following God's calling in our lives today. In fact, for some of you, this is the roadblock, this is the barrier that is keeping you from hearing and following God's calling on your life today. Now, I recently saw an example of this at work in a summer sports league. We have 3 boys at summer sports season. One of them was on a team, great coaches, great team, but some of the teams they played in their sports season, they really wanted to win. I mean, like, all kids want to win, but then there's like parents and coaches who really want to win. You know those parents and coaches, no elbows, eyeballs up here for the story. Well, our son was on a team, and they played this team, and the coach is just notorious for really wanting to win. And as a result, he was known to really just crush some of the kids on his team, even was caught cheating because he really wanted his team to win. And Jonas would come home, and they were a good team. Jonas would come home and say, "Dad, I'm glad I play on my team," even though he just got beat by the team. I'm like, well, why is that? Well, our coaches are nice. Our coaches care about us. Their coach doesn't care about them. And that was how he interpreted the whole thing. I don't know what the situation actually was. But in his pursuit of winning, and hey, winning's a great pursuit. I think that's a good thing to pursue. But do we ever stop and ask, but what is it costing? What is this pursuit costing in my life? Because all of us pursue things in life. And a lot of times this is shaped by your age or your experience in life. For example, in the first decade of life, pretty much all kids pursue the same thing. Here's what it sounds like. Mom, 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 mom. What? Watch this. Dad, watch. Dad, watch. Watch this. Dad, watch. Dad, I'm gonna ride in the laundry basket down the whole stairs. Watch, Dad. There's this need that all kids have. We want approval from our parents in that first decade of life, and then from the first to second decade of life, what we pursue begins to change, or at least we add more things to what we pursue. We still want that on some level, pretty much all of our lives. But then that desire to be successful starts to come in. Sports teams, academics, kids want to be successful. And at about that stage, they also want to start to gain acceptance from their peer group. So they start acting the same way, dressing the same way, doing their hair the same way. So that happens. Then towards the end of the second decade, into the third decade, you start to look for romantic significance. You begin to pursue that. I remember pursuing Kathy while we were dating. We also begin to pursue significance on a bigger level. Maybe we do that through career. I remember in high school and into college, I played guitar all the time. I was always practicing guitar because I wanted to be in a good band, and we started a band and we got good and we played a lot of gigs, and people would look at what I was pursuing. They'd say, wow, you're really into music. No, I'm actually into like cute girls in the audience, but part of my real pursuit was not music. It was standing on a stage, there's cute girls in the audience. That was before I met Kathy. Just to be clear. And as we get older, we pursue a legacy. We pursue a great family dynamics. We want our kids, when they leave the house, we want them to want to come home and visit us again. But all life, depending on season of life and depending on experiences, we are pursuing things as human beings. We are constantly in pursuit of something. But the question we seldom stop and ask is why? Why am I pursuing this? Why am I pursuing that? Why am I chasing this? Why am I chasing that? And we're so busy chasing the thing, pursuing the destination, that we seldom stop and ask, but is that the right pursuit? Is that valuable? And if it is, but why am I chasing it? Because let's be honest, most of the pursuits we have, they're good pursuits. Hey, you want to earn some money. Hey, that's great. That's a good pursuit. You want a great family, great pursuit. You want a good career, awesome pursuit. You want to be successful in your industry. Hey, more power to you. Those are all great things to pursue. I mean, basically, unless you're doing a Mr. White Breaking Bad kind of meth lab drug king pursuit, most of our pursuits in life, they're pretty good. Unless we stop and ask, but why? Well, psychologists will tell you that all of our pursuits are basically rooted in a desire for two things. The two things that we want, according to psychologists, are security and significance. Security and significance. Beneath all of your pursuits, they say, you will find a desire for security and you will find a desire for significance. That's true. But the way we go about achieving those things will have catastrophic influence on the outcome of your life, possibly, or a really good influence on the outcome of your life. So the question is, why am I pursuing the thing I'm pursuing? If you want the new car, great, why are you pursuing it? If you want the new house, great, why are you pursuing it? If you're pursuing the certain body type, great, why are you pursuing it? If you're pursuing more wealth, fantastic, why are you chasing that? Today what we're going to discover is that in asking the question and in answering the question, we have the power to find what keeps us from hearing and obeying God's calling on our lives. To do that, we're going to continue with Abraham's life story. Today we're going to be in Genesis chapter 13, and we're going to see a couple of very ambitious men, and they each have a very specific pursuit. They are both in chase of something, but they are in chase of very different things, and will have a dramatic impact on the outcomes of their life. So in Genesis chapter 13, I'm going to begin at verse 1. Again, if you missed last week, you'll see Abraham, same guy, his name changed later, interchangeable use today. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot, that's his nephew, went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. From the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now, as we get going with this story, already for some of you, your eyes are rolling back in your head, Negev, Egypt, Bethel, Ai, whatever, right? The narrator is going out of his way to show us these are very specific landmarks on a very specific journey Abraham is making, and these details are all very significant, and they all are important. However, I'm going to ask you to file this information away in the back of your mind, and a little bit later, I'm going to come back to it. I wouldn't do this at a normal church, but I know this is Hope, and you guys can really follow along and pay attention. So we're going to come back to this journey later. Right now, we're going to advance the story and see where it's going. Now, Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herders and Lot's. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. Abraham and Lot have a problem. Their problem is they're getting rich. And you say, yeah, things are rough all over. Now, when Americans get rich, it's pretty easy to get rich when you're in America, because you know what happens? The number in your bank account, it just grows, okay? It preferably gets more zeros after it, but it just grows, no big deal. And then you can take some of those numbers and you can turn them into boats or houses or clothes or whatever you want. It's really easy to get rich in America. When nomadic people get rich, it's a little more complicated. There's no bank. There's goats. There's sheep. There's camels. And with them comes more hired help, more tents, more supply chains, more networks. It just gets exponentially complicated as it grows. In fact, a couple chapters later, we see that Abraham had hundreds, literally hundreds of hired men in his employ on his payroll. He is growing a corporation, and there's Lot's corporation side by side. They are both getting larger, and the problem is the land cannot support their wealth because their wealth is eating grass and eating hay, and it needs to be fed. So, quarreling is rising between the herders of Abram and the herders of Lot. This is a problem that Abraham needs to figure out how to solve. The narrator tells us that the Canaanites and the Perizzites were in the land because this is not neutral territory. This is not like America where you can just go from state to state and everyone's happy and there's a police force. They are foreigners speaking a different language, and they are the ones who migrated to this land. They are the outsiders. In their wealth and benevolence, they can be good for a local economy, but they also have strength in numbers. If somehow this house becomes divided against itself, both Abram and Lot are incredibly vulnerable. So this is a precarious position, which is why the narrator tells us and reminds us they're not alone. This situation is not neutral. So Abraham offers a solution which shows remarkable freedom from cultural norms and shows remarkable wisdom. Here's what he thinks. So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Now, what Abraham says sounds like common sense to us today, but I promise you, no one in his generation could even think of a solution like this. And here's why. This was a very patriarchal society. In other words, whoever's male and whoever's older has the influence and has the authority. This is a case where we've got Uncle Abraham and Nephew Lot. Cultural norms demanded that Abraham give the solution, and Lot followed the orders. Abraham smashes cultural norms and says, "Tell you what, Lot, you pick. If you go right, I'll go left. If you go left, I'll go right. No big deal. It's your call." What Lot should have done in this case, clue number one about what Lot is pursuing, what he should have done is said, "No, Uncle Abe, you are my senior. You pick first and I'll go the other way." That's what cultural norms and basic decency should have done. But that's not what Lot does. We'll see what he did in a minute. But what Abraham realizes is that there are multiple avenues to go down, and he cannot pursue them all. You've been in situations where you've got multiple opportunities and you cannot pursue all of them at the same time. Maybe you got a new job offer and it's a nice raise and it's a good job, but you have to move your family somewhere else and you're like, why can't I stay here and have the benefit of more wealth? You can't pursue both at the same time. This is where Abraham's at. He cannot pursue all the options. He's basically looking at three things that are important to him. Number one is his relationship with God. Number two is his relationship with Lot. And number three is his relationship with wealth. And he cannot pursue all three things at once. Basically, here's the situation. He's in option one. I'll stick together with Lot, and we will move somewhere else where the land can support us. The problem is, it's not going to be in Canaan. It's going to be somewhere else where it's more fertile, which means I'm going to have to compromise my relationship with God because God called Abraham to live in Canaan, we saw last week. He would have to break that, move outside of God's calling in order to keep things good with Lot and good with his wealth. Option 2, he could exercise his rights as patriarch, kick Lot out, and keep his relationship with wealth, kind of keep his relationship with God, and lose his relationship with Lot in the process. Or he can do this third option. Lot, you decide, I'll take the leftovers. In this option, he keeps his relationship with God, stays in Canaan, keeps his relationship with Lot, they're still friends, but he compromises his relationship with wealth. He is going to miss out on every opportunity he could have to continue to build his portfolio. But for Abraham, when it comes down to God, family, money, that's the order. He says, I'm going to pursue God in my calling first. I'm going to pursue family and my neighbor second. I'm going to pursue the accumulation of wealth third. And this, again, shows remarkable creativity, remarkable freedom from cultural convention. It shows remarkable confidence in God when he says, hey, you know what? I might lose out on some wealth here. That's okay. I'm going to trust that when God called me here, he wanted me to be here for a very important reason, and maybe I don't see it yet. But I will go forward, trusting the outcomes to him, but I will not disobey his call to live in this land, and I will not violate my relationship with family. Well, Lot hears the invitation, and here's how he responds. This is interesting. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. Now, the place where they were standing between Bethel and Ai is on a ridge, and in about 20 miles, the elevation drops 3,000 feet. So from this ridge, they can look all around. They can see for miles and miles and miles. And when Lot looks north, he sees brown. And when he looks south, he sees brown. And when he looks west, he sees brown. And when he looks east, he sees the Jordan River Valley. He sees where this river plain drops down into the Dead Sea, and it was irrigated in those days, and it was green, and it was fertile, and he sees with his eyes, cha-ching, that's a good place to settle. Now, the place we see this is in what the narrator tells us, that he saw the whole plain of the Jordan well watered like the garden of the Lord. That is not the narrator giving commentary on what the valley looked like. That is the narrator telling us what Lot was feeling in his heart and how he was interpreting. In other words, when Lot looks down at this money-making opportunity, this wealth-building opportunity, he in his heart is having a spiritual experience. He does not just see an opportunity for wealth, he sees an opportunity for salvation. He sees an opportunity to build the Garden of Eden right here on earth. He sees an opportunity for paradise. That's what Lot sees when he sees this well-watered, well-irrigated area. Now, nothing wrong with pursuing financial growth. That's not the problem for Lot. The problem is this valley is just outside the land of Canaan. It is just barely outside of God's calling. It is just really close to Sodom and Gomorrah, which were just pagan places that were anti-God in their orientation. But he wants the wealth. He's chasing the money. He's pursuing the money. But he doesn't stop and ask, why am I chasing that? Why am I pursuing that? See, if your main thing in life is to be rich, if your main thing in life is to have a family, if your main thing in life is to be successful, may I submit to you humbly that the thing you're chasing is not the real thing you're chasing. Whatever you are pursuing right now in your life is not the real thing that you are pursuing, because we are always after something deeper. If what you pursue is the luxury, the relationship, the money, the acceptance, the popularity, the thing you're after isn't really the thing you're after. You're after something deeper, because as human beings, we have a deeper problem. The deeper problem that we have is that we don't know who we really are. We don't know our worth as human beings. We don't know what we're made for. As a result, we have deep insecurities in life. We don't just need the wealth. What we need is to know that our existence is justified. We don't just need the family. We need to know that our lives matter. We don't just need the success. We need to know that our life has value and adds value to the world. In these pursuits, whatever we are chasing, it's not the main thing we're chasing. Like Lot, we're chasing the garden of the Lord. We are chasing paradise. See, when a person says that their greatest desire is to fall in love and get married and someone adores them, well, what they're really saying, what they're really after isn't love, but some kind of assurance that I'm lovable. When someone is chasing success, and they just have to win at all costs, what they're looking for isn't just success, but some kind of assurance that my life matters, that my existence is justified. We're all desperate for this beneath the surface. You see, and in the Garden of Eden, that's when we knew who we were. That's when we knew what our value was. That's when we knew our purpose, because in the Garden of Eden, man and woman walked with the Lord, and we lived in the presence of the Lord, and we worshiped the Lord, and that's what we were created for. That's when we were complete. That's when we were fulfilled in relationship, in perfect harmony and union with God. But we lost that. We lost the garden when we lost God, and the rest of the human race's history has been filled with men and women trying to find our way back into the garden, trying to find our way back into paradise. We're all desperate for something. Lot reveals what he's desperate for isn't just the wealth. Pursue the wealth all you want. That's not the issue. He's after salvation. He's after paradise. He's after heaven on earth. That's what he's looking for. And he's doing what we all do as human beings. He has set his heart on riches in hopes that they are a way to make everything well with his soul. He's trying to find his way back into the garden. And in his heart, he says, that place is like the garden of the Lord. The author tells us a little bit more information. This was, by the way, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So the readers, when they got this, they're like, he's looking at an ash heap. I don't get, no, this was before, everyone. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. Uncle Abe, I'm going east. That's the place where I think I want to settle. Here's the problem. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan. He said, I'm going to follow God's calling on my life, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. See, in his pursuit of the garden of the Lord, he's moving into a place that is going to take him further away from the Lord. So if you ever approach marriage, if you ever approach career, if you ever approach children and think to yourself, finally the garden of the Lord, finally I know my life will matter, finally I will have significance, finally I know I'm lovable, you are putting too much weight on a pursuit that cannot deliver what you hope. That's why there's quarreling, that's why there's arguing among the tribe. Lot hopes he can gain salvation through wealth, and he is ultimately going to be crushed by this. But we do need to see what Lot's doing. This is critical for us, our first fill in the blank today. Lot wants the garden of the Lord without the Lord. That's what Lot is pursuing. I want a godless paradise. I want the paradise, and I think I can get there by pursuing something that does not have God in it. And when we do that, we miss out on the one thing. Here's the irony. We miss out on the one thing that can truly give our lives meaning and purpose and significance and value, and that is God himself. That's where Lot is at. That's a drive inside all of us. Abraham, however, Abraham is very much at peace. How did Abraham get to the place where he can say, hey, you pick, I'm good with whatever? No, seriously, I'm in an arid place, you go take the fertile valley, I'm really fine with that. How does he get there to that kind of contentment and that kind of trust in God? What's driving him? Well, what's driving him, as we saw last week, is the call of God on his life. Now, what does the call of God mean? What does it mean when God calls you? Does it mean, well, before God called me, I used to have sex with everyone, and now I don't? Does it mean I used to be really selfish, but now I give away 10%? Is that what the call of God means? No. If you become a Christian, your life should probably trend in that direction, generally speaking. But that's not what the call of God means. The call of God is not an invitation to follow rules. It's not an invitation to become moral. It's not an invitation to become a good person, because the call of God is a call of grace. It is a call that goes out to the unworthy. God does not call the worthy. He only calls the unworthy. And it is his calling that makes us worthy, and it is an invitation. An invitation to build our lives around something bigger than our hollow pursuits. Now, we have to go to the New Testament to see what Abraham was pursuing in this exactly. But in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, we get insight into what Abraham is chasing in this whole episode that gives him such freedom and peace in this situation that Lot doesn't have. We're told by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. That was last week. He was with his family in a foreign land. God called him, Abraham said, where am I going? God said, I'll tell you when you get there. Abraham said, Sarah, pack up, we're moving. Now look at this next verse. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents. How many of you hate camping? Okay. Abraham spent his life camping after he followed God's call. For he was looking forward. He was looking forward. He was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. In other words, if we could say, Abraham, do you want to live in the city, or do you want to live out in the middle of nowhere with all the goats and sheep for the rest of your life? Abraham said city. Abraham, do you want to live in a house with a comfortable bed and maybe a bathroom? Or do you just want to camp for the rest of your life? He would say house. So Abraham, how can you be content living in tents for the rest of your life? How can you be content saying, Lot, whatever you want is cool, and I know that's going to compromise my ability to grow any more wealth. That's cool. How does he get there? The answer is he was looking beyond his present circumstances. Lot was looking north, south, east, west. Abraham says, I'm not looking in any of those directions. I'm looking forward into time. I'm looking forward to the place when I will get a real city, when I will get a real house, our house that is built and designed by God himself. I'm looking forward to a house with foundations that cannot be shaken. The invitation to become a Christian, to be called by God, is not to give up sin and become a religious, moral person. It is an invitation to change the foundation of your life, to change the foundation of your life towards our earthly pursuits for significance and acceptance, and rebuild a new foundation that is built on God himself, which is how we were originally designed to live in the garden, in God's presence. Abraham got a new foundation. He started out as a pagan, worshiping the moon. God calls him new foundation. I am now looking forward to the real city, to the real home, to the place built by God himself. And if I miss out on some possible money-making opportunities, don't care, looking forward. If I miss out on some popularity, don't care, looking forward. If I leave some opportunities on the table in my life because I have been called by God, doesn't matter, looking forward. Abraham has been given a new foundation of his life. Lot still has the old foundation. So when he has the opportunity to pursue wealth, he sees it as his salvation. Abraham already has his salvation, and it is rooted in the promise of God and in his calling of grace. he can prioritize God and his calling. He can prioritize his love for his family. He doesn't need the wealth. Take it or leave it. He's fine. Doesn't change him. How do we get to that kind of place? We can have that kind of freedom, that kind of courage, that kind of confidence like Abraham. Well, let's rewind back to the first few verses of this text. Abraham was on a journey. The narrator tells us he was in Egypt, went to the Negev, went to Bethel, and then he went to where he first camped. Now, what's all that about? When we left off last week, God called Abraham to go. Abraham said, yes, sir, and off he went. And we kind of stopped there. We're not reading every verse of the life of Abraham. You should do some homework and read along yourself. What happened after last week was he went to Canaan, camped there between Bethel and Ai, worshiped God, built an altar, and said, God, I am following your calling. But he didn't quite build his new foundation yet. And there was a drought in the land, and food got scarce, and he said, we better get out of here. So he moves the whole family down to Egypt in the Nile River Valley, because there they would be provided for. And when they got to the border of Egypt, there's the bumper sticker on your camel at the wayside stop, and they stopped. And he says, okay, Sarah, listen, here's the deal. I know you're 65, but baby, you are smoking. Here's what's going to happen. Pharaoh, if Pharaoh sees you, he might want you in his harem, and that's not good for my life. So let's just tell everyone, you're my sister, I'm your brother. That's the whole deal. So they go down to Egypt. Pharaoh's told, hey, by the way, this very affluent man is moving into our country. Pharaoh says, good for the economy. And he has a smoking hot sister. Good for my harem. Pharaoh sent men, took Sarah to his harem. Pharaoh finds out, she's actually married. He calls in Abraham, says, what are you trying to do here? Abraham says, well, I was scared. Pharaoh says, get out, throws him out of the country, evicts him from Egypt. Now, if you're married, you've probably had long car rides with your spouse after an argument that were kind of awkward and uncomfortable. How about a month-long camel ride after that incident? I'm your sister. Nice. All right, so I don't know how that went. Could have been good. So the narrator tells us all these landmarks. First he goes to the Negev, then he goes to Bethel. Well, what's all that about? Abraham is rewinding. He is taking a reverse journey from his destination. He has suddenly, it happened like that, found himself so far outside of God's will, so far outside of God's calling. It is a faith disaster. It is a family disaster. It is a train wreck. Abraham says, I'm going to backtrack to the last place where I was obeying God. I'm going to backtrack to the last place I was worshiping God and trusting God and hoping in God and aligned with God. So I went through the Negev. I'm going back through the Negev. It's the desert south of Israel. And I'm going back to Bethel, and I'm going back to where I built that altar because that was the last place I was in God's calling. And he worshiped the Lord there. And he did because Abraham understood the calling of God is not a calling to obey. It is a calling of grace. And it is God's grace for the failures like Abraham that gives me hope and joy. I love that in the Bible, the heroes that we are told to look up for do stuff way worse in their marriage than I do. That just makes me feel so good to know that God's grace is inexhaustible. God says, you want to know what it means to be a great man of faith? Look at Abraham. God, he jacked everything up. Bingo. It's about me, not him. It's about me, not you. God's call is a call to grace. Let that change the foundation of his life. Let that love, let that mercy, let that unconditional forgiveness give you a new foundation so you look forward to the city that was built and designed by God himself. That's how Abraham got a new foundation. It was the call. Here's how the story wraps up. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot parted from him, look around from where you are. Remember, they're up on this ridge. Look around from where you are to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. How could God make this kind of promise to a man who is a big failure like Abraham? How could he show this kind of kindness to a man who is this kind of failure like Abraham? The answer is to see the one to whom this story is pointing. Do you know of anyone else who is also taken up to a high place and told to look around? Who is also promised that everything you see, I will give to you? There's a true and better Abraham, the son of Abraham, Jesus Christ, who in his life was taken up to a high place not by God, but by Satan. And he was told, everything you see I will give to you if for just a moment, not forever, for just a moment, you disobey and you get outside of God's calling on your life. Jesus, if you will do that for just a second, I'm going to give you everything that you can see. Now, here's what's interesting. When Satan took Jesus up to a high point, what he offered Jesus already belonged to him by right. But Jesus refused it. When God took Abraham up to a high place and promised him everything he could see, it was not Abraham's by right, but God gave it to him anyway. You see, God said to Abraham, these aren't yours by right, but I'm giving them to you. Satan says to Jesus, these things are yours by right, but Jesus refuses them. Why? Because Jesus had his gaze set forward to the one thing in the entire universe he did not have: you. Like Lot, we've pursued things looking for a garden without the Lord in it. Jesus said, what I want is you. And I want to call you by my grace. And that means I need to do something about your sin problems and your chase problems and your pursuit problems. So he came and he gave up everything that was his by rights so that you could gain what was not yours by right. He came to give up his glory and live in your place so that through his death and resurrection you could gain the home with permanent foundations in heaven that you could not gain through your greatest pursuits. It's a calling of grace. And when you see Jesus doing that for you, that gives us a new foundation, and that allows us to move forward with the obedience and conviction of Abraham with God's calling. So 3 summary points, then we'll be done today. First one is this: seek God, not the garden. What are you pursuing in this season of life? What are you giving your life to, your hours to, your energy to, your wealth to? What are you pursuing? Is it possible that in your pursuit, you're looking for the garden, but you're not pursuing God himself? Because if all you are seeking is the garden, you will lose both God and the garden in the end. There will be a day when whatever you are pursuing is taken away. But if you pursue God and do not worry about the garden, in the end you get both. If you pursue the garden, you lose both. If you pursue God, you gain both. Abraham is pursuing God. So in your pursuits, ask, am I pursuing God or just the garden? Second thing is this: take the long view. Take the long view of life. Like Abraham, look forward. You as a human being have far too much value and worth to give your life away to pursuits that are anything less than eternal in significance. Your value is that you are made by God. Your value is that you are redeemed by the blood of Jesus. Your value is astronomical. Are the things you're pursuing worthy of your value? Take the long view. Look forward to the permanent city. Last thing is this. Jesus lost it all, so you will gain it all. Look at the depth of the love of Jesus Christ, who was willing to give up everything that was his by rights, so that you could gain everything that was not yours by rights, and that is his calling of grace. We'll pick it up there next Sunday. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you for preserving this amazing account from the life of Abraham. I ask that as we reflect on it, we will create space in our lives this week to honestly reflect on the things we have been pursuing. Father, most of what we are pursuing isn't bad in and of itself, but give us wisdom to recognize, are we pursuing a garden that doesn't have you in it? Give us the perspective of Abraham, that we would pursue you because we know you'll give us a true paradise. For those of us who this morning find ourselves outside of your calling and outside of your will, thank you for letting us see that your grace comes to the unworthy. Let us see that it is your kindness that leads us to repentance. I ask that the men and women today listening would be humble before you, because this is only about you and them. And they would seek your presence and know that you are a God who graciously forgives. I ask that they would return to worshiping you. That will be for their good and your glory. And Father, wherever this truth lands with us today, I ask that by seeing Jesus and his love, we will have the wisdom to apply it and the courage to trust you. We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.